Welcome everyone, all 116 participants, and I think we're still, welcoming people in from the waiting room. So welcome to our fourth Ikeda Center virtual dialogue of this year of 2020. Thank you all so much for being here. And my name is Lillian, and I'm the program manager here at the Ikeda Center. And it's so nice to see so many familiar faces, but also brand new ones. So thank you so much again for joining us this evening. And so tonight actually is, tonight's event is especially significant because today marks 27 years since our center was established in 1993. And despite, an unprecedented year of challenges, we feel so fortunate that we're able to celebrate our anniversary together with all of you in this way, and to continue to use dialogue as a way to really challenge, our feelings of hopelessness, despair, anxiety, all of the things that we are experiencing at this time. And so for those of you who are joining us for the very first time and may not know much about our center, I thought I could share a little background on the work that we do. So our center is located in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and our mission is to build cultures of peace through learning and dialogue. And all of our work is aimed at helping to establish a shared global ethic across cultures and religions. An ethic based on respect for the absolute dignity of life itself, a firm belief in the human potential for good and for transforming the world, and a clear recognition of the interdependence of all life. And our founder, Daisaku Ikeda, is a peace builder, writer, educator, and a Buddhist leader. And he established this center really with the hope that people from all walks of life, just as we all are here, all different faiths, ethnicities, backgrounds, experiences, can come together to engage in open-hearted, open-minded dialogue, which he believes is the surest path to peace. So the theme for today's dialogue is climate hope, awareness into action. And this is actually a topic that, we've been thinking about for some time now, and is something that the youth in our steering committee have been wanting to discuss for the last couple of years. And in fact, we had planned a dialogue nights at the end of March on this topic, which seems like lifetimes ago now, I'm sure, for everyone. But we had to cancel due to COVID-19. So we're so thrilled to bring this conversation back to the table, knowing that many of us, continue to grapple with it. And actually, for decades, Mr. Ikeda has written extensively on the topic of climate change and climate justice. And in a proposal he wrote in 2002, he shared that no matter how complex global challenges may seem, we must remember that it is we ourselves who have given rise to them. It is therefore impossible that they are beyond our power as human beings to resolve. Refocusing on humanity, reforming and opening up the inner capacities of our lives, this kind of individual human revolution can enable effective reform and empowerment on a global scale. So, I think this idea of human revolution is really key in Mr. Ikeda's philosophy because, right, when we think about an issue like climate change, it can be easy to feel, completely powerless and think to ourselves, what is the point, in trying anyway, right? And I actually find myself thinking this way often, not just about issues like climate change, but about so many of the things that are happening in our world, especially this year. And so speaking to this, Mr. Ikeda writes in another proposal from 2014, he says, in our world today, there is a tendency for people to avert their eyes from pressing problems. This tendency becomes stronger the more serious the problems are. Even among those who are aware, for example, of the threat posed by nuclear weapons or the dangers of environmental destruction, people are apt to give up without trying, convinced that their efforts would not be meaningful. More than anything, breaking the shackles of denial, powerlessness, and apathy requires a deep sense of mission and commitment based on a personal vow. So, this idea of human revolution that Mr. Ikeda speaks of, I think is this personal vow, right, that we each can make to challenge the things in our life that make us feel despair, that cause us to separate, right, ourselves from those different from us, that make us feel apathetic about issues that seem like they don't affect us. And I think we can see this kind of vow and individual revolution in, for example, the many youth climate activists who have emerged, in recent years. And we can also see this in the countless ordinary individuals who have been speaking up and taking action against racial injustice in our country and around the world. So today's event, as you know in the title, it's awareness into action, right? So I think, of course, on one hand, it is awareness of the realities of climate change. But on the other hand, it is also the awareness that each of us can contribute in our own unique ways to make this world a better place, that we are each, right, that powerful to change the current of the times. And based on the Buddhist philosophy that he upholds, Mr. Ikeda also believes in the interconnectedness of all things in life. Therefore, right, we cannot build our happiness on the suffering of others. And so as a center, we really believe that by engaging in this issue of climate change and climate justice from this deeper perspective, we can develop the ability and capacity to address the countless other issues that we face right now in our world. So anyway, that is enough talking from me, and I'm sure everyone's very excited to get started with our event. But before we jump in, I'm going to give a very quick overview of what you can expect today from the event. So first, we're going to start out with an icebreaker activity. And then we'll jump actually right into the panel discussion featuring our three wonderful panelists who you'll meet in a little bit, Breea Govenar, Parul Kashyap, and Victoria Torkornoo, and our program and office assistant, Priandra Noel, who you'll also meet in a little bit, will be facilitating the discussion. And then after the panel, we'll break out into small discussion groups. So at that point, you can start exercising your dialogue muscles, and you'll have the opportunity to reflect and talk about your own unique potential as it relates to the climate crisis. And we also have an activity planned, actually. So in your small groups, you'll have the chance to come up with your own climate hope statement. So we'll explain more about that later, but it's very exciting. So please look forward to that. And finally, we will conclude the event with large group reflections and then closing remarks by our executive advisor, Jason Gula. So last announcement that I'd like to make is, for those of you who don't know, we actually have a student ambassadors program here at the Ikeda Center. And we would love to continue engaging, especially university students in these pressing issues such as climate change beyond today's event. So if you are a university student and interested in getting involved with activities at the center, please fill out a form that our program staff will be posting in the chat, and we'll post it throughout the event. So if you fill out the form, we will reach out to you directly. So without further ado, I would like to invite our wonderful events and publications coordinator, Henri, to introduce the icebreaker activity for the evening. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Lillian. That was great. And hello, everyone. It's really great to see you all tonight. And I'm excited to start the icebreaker, though with all of your smiling faces, I'm not sure how much ice we need to break. But nevertheless, this is a really fun activity to get to know one another. And for this, I just have some instructions. So the first is that you'll be using your reaction button. So if everyone knows what that is, you can hover your mouse over to the bottom of your Zoom screen, and you should see a happy face with the word reactions underneath it. If you click on that, you will see a clapping emoji or a thumbs up emoji. So if you see it, please click on the thumbs up emoji, and you should see it on the corner of your screen. For those, yes, there you go. And for those on your phone, it's actually located on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. There are 3 little dots, and your emoji should show up. So I see many of you have figured it out. You're all experts in using the reaction button. So for this one, please use your thumbs up emoji. If for some reason you can't find it, you can also turn on your video camera and either raise your hand or do a thumbs up. That'll also work as well. So great. And for next, I'll be reading a series of statements. So when you hear that, if you agree with the statement or if you would reply affirmatively to that statement, if you could do a thumbs up. And if you don't agree, then you would just not put a thumbs up. So normally this activity is done in person, and you can see, you know, kind of get a feel for where everybody is coming in from. But for this, since we're on Zoom, you know, you might want to scroll through some pages to see how many people put their thumbs up, or you can just look at your immediate screen right now. But yes, it'll be a way for us to be able to really reflect on, you know, these questions and our relationship with climate change. And since we all come from varying backgrounds, it'll give us a sense of where everyone is starting from, so that we can really move forward in this conversation together. So it's meant to really be a space for reflection and learning. So let's get started. So the first question, actually, not related to climate change. Please indicate thumbs up if this is your first Ikeda Center event. So I see a few thumbs up. Awesome. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for the very first time on our 27th anniversary. And those coming back for the second, third, or 20th time, welcome back again. We're always so grateful for your support. And the next question is, please show a thumbs up if you're tuning in from outside of the US. I did see some people say they were tuning in from Mexico, India, so welcome, welcome. This is definitely one of the pluses of being able to move to the virtual platform to get so many people from different countries. Last two events, we had 19 countries represented. So thank you also for dealing with the time difference and staying up late. The next one, please show a thumbs up if you have started your own food garden during this pandemic. Anyone with food gardens? I see a few. That's great. Really admire those with the space and the talent to be able to do that. I probably would not be able to take care of so many plants and be successful, but that's a wonderful way to really think about where our food comes from. So please indicate a thumbs up next if you drive as a mode of transportation. Yes, definitely a relevant climate change question. I think, not to judge anybody, I also drive, but I think I'm always constantly thinking about, you know, how I can reduce my carbon footprint. So, you know, finding ways to really walk and go to places nearby. But of course, you know, we all need cars also to be able to get to our locations. So the next one, please show a thumbs up if shopping online has become commonplace for you. Yes, definitely many people affected by the pandemic. I know for me, I didn't shop online, rarely shopped online before March, but I think now I've ordered so many things online. So yes, next one. If you learned about climate change in school, please show a thumbs up. Yeah, very few people. I know it hasn't really been in the curriculums often, but it's great to see some people did learn about climate change in school. The next one, please show a thumbs up if you have access to clean water. Yes, that's most of us. Yeah, I read a stat on the UN's website recently that says billions of people, mostly in rural areas, still lack these basic services. So whenever I think about this question, I really think about, you know, things that we take for granted, but many, many other people do not have access to clean water, depending on the city or the nation that they're in. Next, if you or someone you know has had health challenges related to climate change, please show a thumbs up. This might be from severe weather, environmental degradation, air or water quality. Many people have been affected, so thank you for sharing. Next, if you had the option to live in a place where you don't have to think about the risks of flooding or fires, please indicate a thumbs up if you had the option to live where you don't have to think about these. I know many people, especially our friends on the West Coast, we're talking about all of the fires that are happening there. So we hope everyone is staying safe and that your friends and family are safe as well. And finally, last question. If you feel hopeful about the future, please show a thumbs up. Yes, that's definitely the theme for our event. So those who didn't show a thumbs up yet, we hope that we'll be able to spread some hope through this event. And I will pass it over to Lillian to take it over. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Henri, for leading such a wonderful icebreaker. And for those of you who started your own garden, I'll be reaching out to you as well. Maybe I'll come over for some fresh veggies. So thank you all so much. So now for the main event of tonight, let's welcome our panelists and also our program office assistant, Bree, who will be facilitating the panel discussion. So I'll turn it over to you, Bree.
Thank you so much, Lillian. Wow, 2020 has been quite a challenging year. So we are super grateful to be able to engage in this conversation with Parul, Breea, and Victoria. So thank you all so much. Yay, let's give them a round of applause. It's really, it's so encouraging, and it really gives us many reasons. I saw someone doing that. It gives us many reasons to really be optimistic about our future, the fact that we're having this conversation. So can't say enough thank yous. But with that said, are we ready to dive into the conversation? And actually, too, before I dive in, I was wondering if we can invite everyone to turn off their cameras. That way all our panelists can kind of appear in the main screen. And the stop video function on the bottom left-hand side of your screen should have that function. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Great, I can see Parul, Breea, and Victoria right here. Great. So to kick things off, as everyone shuts their videos off, Breea, do you mind introducing yourself first?
Oh, thank you so much. My name is Breea Govenar. I live in Providence, Rhode Island, and until very recently, I was a professor of biology, a researcher in marine ecology, deep sea ecology, and the director of a center for increasing student engagement through mentored experiences in undergraduate research and creative activity. About a month ago, I transitioned to a new path in my career as the executive director of a family foundation that supports the advancement of equity for women and girls in the arts and sciences. I'm really honored and delighted to participate in this discussion today, in part because of my intersecting interests in the environment and society.
Hi, my name is Victoria. I'm from Worcester, Massachusetts. I'm a senior in high school, and for college, I want to major in pre-med and minor in dance because dance is my hobby. And today, I'm very excited to hear people's opinions on climate change. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Parul Kashyap, and I'm a youngish working professional in the Boston area, focusing in innovation and healthcare access. I work with hospitals to bring telehealth to patients in underserved areas in the US. I grew up in Northern California and moved to Boston for grad school a few years ago. And in between, I've lived and worked in India, Honduras, Silicon Valley, and Tanzania, looking at different ways to bridge the gap between the people that needed care the most and the people that could provide care. And that's made me reflect on the bigger picture of how equity is created and resources are shared. Along the way, I've had the privilege of spending time in various cultures and communities and witnessed disparities and injustice, especially in the environment, on a macro level, as well as to the micro level. And there are days where I feel like I can be an agent of change for the better, but some days I feel helpless about global warming and world peace as a whole. I'm hoping that today's discussion will help me piece together the challenges of how I view creating value in climate science in ways that reinforce an idea of positive transformation across the planes of the macro and micro decisions being made daily in our world. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the diversity of thought and experience that we have in this space today. So already so exciting. And with that said, the first question that I would like to pose to the panel is, in this age of COVID, what are some of your growing concerns about climate change? And in the face of these concerns, what does climate justice mean to you? And yeah, I was wondering if, Parul, we can start off with you.
Sure thing. So as I mentioned, I'm from California. And as many of you may know, California is especially on fire along with the rest of the West Coast. And I think in the last decade, the frequency of extreme disasters such as wildfires, temperature, droughts, flooding, and storms are on the rise. And my biggest concern is that the threat of environmental change that we're all witnessing has been so politicized and economically capitalized that has split society, and we're incapable of thinking and taking action on what's most important, which is sustaining humanity. So I think for me, justice really means leaving no one behind and not taking action on what's based economically or what's quantifiably correct, but what's fair and just and is creating equitable access to all people. And often working with marginalized communities, I see so many disparities between the people and groups that are making decisions on resources and access, and not seeing whether it actually fits with, at the micro level with users and communities and the people that actually perceive solutions as barriers, whether it's by cultural or gender norms or access to education or transportation. Not all macro solutions really fit us all. And in reflecting towards this event, I was reminded of a quote that Mahatma Gandhi shared, that Earth provides enough to satisfy every man's needs, but not every man's greed. So that's something that I've been thinking about, of just like, how can we think about like resource management in an equitable manner?
Those are such good points. Thank you, Parul. For my part, I am concerned also about the disproportionate effects of climate change in communities that have been marginalized, excluded, or otherwise disadvantaged by existing power structures. Climate justice for me is about accountability. Specifically, to mitigate the various effects and consequences of climate change, we as a society need to protect those who are most vulnerable. We need to fix systemic practices of discrimination to be more equitable and inclusive. And to adapt a quote by Ruth Bader Ginsburg, we need greater representation of our diverse population in the places where decisions are made.
So for me, my concern is how the future generation is going to take care of the environment. And as people care less and less about the environment, the worse the environment is going to be. With COVID and climate change issues occurring, people will spend more time indoors from the toxic air created and the virus. And both happening at the same time is concerning because people won't know how much longer we will have to stay isolated from others due to the poor environment outside from the virus. So to me, climate justice means taking control in the environment we live in and the people making a change to improve the environment. So I did a project with my friends where I asked them some questions about climate change, and this were some of their answers. So the first question is, what are your growing concerns about climate change? And both of them agreed that it will be too late to fix it. That's their concern. For number 2, it says, what types of actions are you taking to minimize your negative effects on the environment? And they said, use less plastic and eat things that are healthy. They both agreed on that. And number 3, it says, who or what inspires you to care more about the climate? So my first friend says inspirational speeches, and my other friend says news articles. So for number 4, it says, what helps you maintain hope during this time? My first friend said that a quote that says, the most truthful thing that I've heard, we do not need to wait till the last minute to fix our issues. And then my other friend said, enough people that care, that doing a lot to help the climate change. So number 6, I asked them a quote. I'll pull up a quote. It says, in fact, every great change throughout history has come from people. We do not have to wait. We can start the change right now. And I asked them how that quote resonates with them. One of my friends said that she believes that instead of waiting for someone to make a change, we have to be the ones to make the change first. And both of them agreed with them that that was like a very important part of the quote, and that's what it means to both of them. And the last question I asked was, how do you envision climate hope to look like? And my first friend said, educating people on better ways to improve the environment to give hope in the future. And my other friend said, when top lawmakers have discussions about climate change and have a vision and goal to have a change, and when there is a goal, people will most likely work towards it. But if there is no dialogue or goal, then nothing will happen. That's it.
Yeah, thank you so much. My mind's spinning with all the with all the statements that I really resonate with. And I think the theme is that the power of words, right? Everything from experiences to what are the words that we're taking with and running with? What are the words that really inspire us to do better versus the words that tear us down and make us hopeless? And I think what I'm hearing from the three of you is really this importance of us to proactively in our daily lives reach out to people, both friends, family, strangers, and and the like, with a mask on if you're going outside. But yeah, and it also makes me reflect on how I too feel overwhelmed sometimes with how, the resolution to climate crisis seems so far away. But because we've been studying Mr. Ikeda's ideas together in terms of how he responds to climate change, I think it's really helped empower me, even in moments where space is like the front page. And so with that said, this leads me to wanting to pose two questions. One is there a passage from Mr. Ikeda that has resonated with you? I know Victoria shared one, and I'm interested in hearing more. And the second question is, how are you applying or see yourself applying his ideas in your daily life? Empowerment time.
So this is Parul. I can start it off. So having a background in public health and business management, I'm constantly looking at how can we allocate resources and how can everyone really get a piece of the pie. And as a project manager on a day-to-day basis, I'm always thinking about okay, so we've figured out the pie. How can I now package this pie up and get it out to people? And in thinking about, the many different dialogues that Mr. Ikeda has had with different leaders, I gravitated towards this book called Knowing Our Worth. And that is a dialogue between Mr. Ikeda and Ernst Ulrich von Weizsäcker. I'm going to mispronounce that, who was a famous German scientist and leader at various environmental think tanks. And, they really talked about how we need to make a shift in our society in the way that we think about the growth of our humanity and how it's based off of the GDP of a nation rather than the welfare of a population. And there's various methods that they discussed. And one of the methods that I really gravitated towards was this new method called the Gross National Happiness Index, which has come out, which looks at the foundations of sustainable, equitable socioeconomic development, environmental conservation, reservation and promotion of culture, and good governance. And I really liked what they talked about in terms of how can a country and nation actually look at taking this macro methodology and bring that to the people. So that's something that I'm trying to grasp is okay, now that there's sort of these box solutions out there, how can I actually bring that to my local level community? So
that's powerful. Thank you so much, Parul. What about Breea or Victoria? Is there another quote that really stuck with you that Mr. Ikeda shared, or something you're applying?
I think that, well, the quote that I mentioned earlier, it just reminded me about how when I chant and I pray for something. So I'm a Buddhist, and as a Buddhist, we pray for things to overcome our struggles. So when I pray for something and it doesn't come true, I think that maybe it wasn't meant to be, but then I realized that it didn't happen because I didn't make the effort to overcome my obstacle. And that just reminded me about how with the environment, making the environment better involves us starting it first and making the action. For example, we get back what we give. If we treat the environment poorly, in return we'll have a poor environment. If we treat it in the correct way, we will have a beautiful environment. So that's what I thought about when I read that.
That's so beautiful. It really captures the oneness of life and environment, that everything you do does count because it manifests in the things that happen outside. So yeah, thanks for that reminder.
And I found something in one of Mr. Ikeda's peace proposals to the UN that I reread after reading it the first time in 2014 when I was teaching a class, actually a first-year seminar on symbiosis, and working with the students to see the ways in which biology can teach us about the interconnectedness of life. And when I went back to this peace proposal, I found something else that challenged a notion that is discussed in science quite frequently of resilience. And so in the peace proposal, Mr. Ikeda talks about resilience from a perspective of physics. But as an ecologist, we often refer to resilience as the ability to return to the same. And if you had just asked me kind of on the surface how I felt about the word resilience to describe, kind of our ability to overcome the challenges presented by climate change, I think I would feel a little frustrated with just returning to the status quo. I wouldn't want things to necessarily kind of return to the state that they were before, let's say, an environmental disaster. But in the peace proposal, Mr. Ikeda says, if we are to realize the rich possibilities inherent in the concept of resilience, we will need to expand and recast our understanding of what it means. Resilience, in other words, should not be thought of as simply our capacity to prepare for or respond to threats. Rather, we should think of it in terms of realizing a hopeful future, rooted in people's natural desire to work together toward common goals, to sense progress toward those goals in a tangible way. It should be seen as an integral aspect of humankind's shared project to create the future, a project in which anyone, anywhere can participate, and which lays the solid foundations for a sustainable global society. So this gave me a completely new way of thinking about resilience as not just, this kind of return to the status quo, return to, what we think of as normal, but actually the advancement of progress that really can create a much more sustainable and peaceful world.
Wow. Yeah, it really highlights how when I think of resilient people, it's not those who are just happily, it's great if you can happily go through things, but I think resilience also comes with having seen struggle, having experienced what you don't want to continue to experience, but using that situation as an opportunity to see what you can do to create like a sustainable, whether it be future or relationship or, whatever it might be. So I think this theme of resilience is something I'd like to keep at the forefront of my mind as we tackle this too, and hearing what you said. And you said hopeful, which hope is a word that's always, sparking in my mind when I think of Mr. Ikeda, because I think I saw it in the chat somewhere too, but he says that hope is a decision. And I think that beautifully articulates, the power and the choice that each of us has to transform any hopeless situation to a super, super, super hope-filled one. And so, with such an overwhelming challenge in the face of climate change, I really wanted to hear, or we all really want to hear, what creating climate hope looks like for each of you, and how does this inform the way you think about the future? If someone wanted to start it off, what are your thoughts about it, Victoria? Can I ask you?
Okay, so to me, creating climate hope begins with educating kids and teens on how to keep the environment healthy and clean. In school, we aren't taught much about climate change, so if we are taught more about it and more awareness is brought to it, we can make a change. With bringing more awareness, more people will keep the environment cleaner and healthier, allowing others to learn from those who are changing the environment and passing it on to the next generation. So yeah, I think that it's very much about like passing it on to the next generation and showing people that this is, instead of making it worse, we can make the environment better, and bringing awareness to in school about it. Because before this experiment, I didn't really know a lot about climate change. Honestly, the last time we talked about it was probably in elementary school, and we haven't talked about it since. So I think that those are very important things to keep in mind. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. The awareness into action piece of our title, right? I think a lot about how, so many young people, we're like sponges, we can absorb everything. And so if we have that awareness, how much change that all the young people can do, which, as Lillian stated earlier too, many youth are standing up like us. And yeah, thank you for sharing that, Victoria. What about Parul? Can I ask you?
Something that I realized in the Icebreaker alone, it just seemed like everyone has different levels of education around climate change, whether you learned about it in school or you didn't. And I just thought about, just attending this event alone just reminded me of this common teaching in Buddhism that was also actually in the peace proposal in 2014 to the UN. And it says that if you light a lantern for another, it will also brighten your own way. So I feel like with all of us coming together today, it's really been a way that we can, spark that lantern and spark that hope in the next person. And for me personally, I think in thinking about the future and how I can create hope, I realized that I've become hyper aware of how I'm consuming information and how I can be better in being an agent of change. There's actually a documentary that came out on Netflix called The Social Dilemma, and which made me realize that even though I try to diversify my news sources, it's so easy to get filtered news and facts of the world. And through this, I realized that my own prescription to my resilience is how I learn and how I'm creating hope. And in learning, I pace myself with, reading through news from different sources, within the US, non-US, globally, academic papers, actually learning from the subject matter experts in climate science and not necessarily social media influencers or politicians. And, but also, building boundaries in my consumption, because it's so easy to wind up in constant scrolling and likes and feeling overwhelmed, especially since information seems so endless and so easily accessible in today's world about every corner of injustice and chaos that you find out, right? And then I realized that I think I really combat all my learning and information consumption through Daisaku Ikeda's philosophy. And in that way, I feel like I'm creating hope. And in facing the realities of our environment has to start with me and my own perception in responding to the chaos, especially one disaster after another that keeps on happening this year. And I think more than, the meditative practice of like Buddhism, I keep coming back to Daisaku Ikeda's philosophy and find his dialogues, not only with world leaders, Buddhists, and common, citizens like me, on how I can focus on really redirecting, reforming, and nurturing my own resilience with myself and my environment. Yeah, and so that's something that Breea, you were sharing about resilience, and I feel like that's how I've been creating resilience, is like this constant habit of like learning and this habit of creating hope at the same time.
That's awesome. And, touching upon, some of the feelings I have about, moving forward in a more just society. And as we respond to these ideas of environmental justice, I really feel like our individual and societal response to climate change will require diversity in action. I don't see a path forward that isn't inclusive of all people. And to achieve this, we have to recognize our similarities as people and our hopes and our dreams and our values, but also to recognize that not all people have the same experience in pursuing those hopes, dreams, and values. And a concept that was elucidated for me in my Buddhist practice is that every person has a life worthy of respect. And our differences are actually what make us great, not what need to divide us. To learn from and to connect with other people, really that we've learned through events like this and through our, study of Mr. Ikeda's works, that the best mechanism is heart-to-heart dialogue. But I've also learned that if you don't know or encounter people different than you, it is possible to start with first-person stories through articles, books, and movies written or made by people from different backgrounds than our own. And Mr. Ikeda said in his 2020 peace proposal to the UN that precisely because the challenge of climate change is so complex and requires a multifaceted approach, we can view this challenge as presenting a remarkable diversity of opportunities for human beings to give expression to their limitless potential. He says also, because climate change is an issue that will leave no one untouched, it has the potential to catalyze heretofore unseen global solidarity and action. Our success or failure in actualizing this potential is, in fact, the defining issue of our time. And I want to be part of actualizing the potential of every individual and fostering global solidarity in a multifaceted approach to address the challenges of climate change.
Wow. I recently took an implicit bias training course that my alma mater hosted for us. And it, interestingly enough, talked about how we all have bias because we live in a society and because we have a brain. That was the second point. And just with everything you three said, it just reminds me that much more that like, it's easy for even me, myself, as someone who I think is pretty open-minded, to kind of become narrow-minded when I forget to really open my mind to not just the possibilities, but the differences that maybe I'm not registering because I'm so in my own thoughts. So yeah, and just hearing everything you three shared, I'm just really thinking about how much more I can do just in this, we're doing it now, right? And so it also, I just wanted to read 3 attributes of global citizenship that Mr. Ikeda shares, because I'm also seeing in the comments how someone had mentioned, yeah, the global citizenship aspect that he mentions. Would it be okay if I read it really quick? So it was at a 1996 Teachers College speech that Mr. Ikeda shares this, but he says that he thinks that he can state with confidence that the following are essential elements of global citizenship. 1, the wisdom to perceive the interconnectedness of all life and living. 2, the courage not to fear or deny difference, but to respect and strive to understand people of different cultures and to grow from encounters with them. And then 3, the compassion to maintain an imaginative empathy that reaches beyond one's immediate surroundings and extends to those suffering in distant places. And I think just throughout this whole conversation, each of you really have been demonstrating, even in the planning sessions, how much it's so important to cultivate these 3 things. So in the couple minutes we had, I want to kind of sprinkle this question in of, you know, in hearing these 3 points, how you're feeling. That might be very broad, but yeah, how do you feel about those 3 attributes? It is a lot to process. I kind of threw a big one there, but.
Can you highlight those 3 again real quick?
Wisdom, courage, and compassion. Yeah, it's to just see another and their humanity by acknowledging that each one of us has those 3 qualities, I think is the essence. But yeah, any thoughts? How do you feel, Victoria, when you hear those 3 words, wisdom, courage, and compassion?
I feel like that they're very powerful words, and having all 3 of them is really powerful. Like, to have wisdom, you can always like guide people in the right direction, and compassionate is like you can always like have like sympathy for people and like be there for people. What was the 3rd one?
Courage.
Courage. And courage is like, you know, bravery. You can you can do so many things with courage, because when you have fear, it's like it stops you from doing so much. So I think they're very powerful words.
Yes.
So I can share a little bit. I think.
Sorry.
I think, you know, just echoing what Victoria was sharing earlier about not waiting to take action. And when we're thinking about how we want to take action, and it, you know, I was reminded actually something that Doug, so the 2nd Secretary General of the UN, I'm going to butcher his name, Dag Hammarskjöld, actually shared once with his friend John Steinbeck, actually the famous American novelist, that, you know, when John Steinbeck asked him how he could help, he just simply said that, you know, sit on the ground and talk to people. And that's the most important thing. And in thinking about any, you know, again, I go back to my macro-micro example, because sometimes we can be so overwhelmed by this giant concept of global warming and climate change. But it just has to start with, you know, doing the next like right thing in our life. And for me, practicing that like courage, wisdom, and compassion just starts with like sparking the dialogue with the next person. And just understanding that, you know, what Breea said, that we've all had different experiences and we all need to like learn from each other. And, you know, through the combination of like learning from each other's experiences to like what we know as, and accepting the impact that we're making as human beings on the environment, like I feel like that's where we can really make the next like step and momentum into, you know, combating climate change and creating hope.
Thank you. And yeah, with this minute that we have left, I do want to hear from you too, Breea.
Oh, well, the reason I was so quiet at first is that those, three qualities are things that, really I try to bring forth in my life and every day in every way kind of thing. And so I wanted to like refocus on this particular topic. But I think that, it touches me very personally because I can have grand ideas and goals, and I feel a tremendous amount of kind of confidence in my ability as, a woman in society. And then on a personal level, I really struggle with my self-esteem and my shyness. And so, I have to constantly work to bring these things up in my one-on-one interactions with people. And so, I tend to be someone who kind of wants to duck behind everybody else when it comes to, kind of, interpersonal interactions where I can, give speeches in auditoriums or lead large meetings. But then one-on-one, sometimes I feel like I really struggle with, kind of bringing that voice into that more intimate space. And so I think actually that process of inner work, inner transformation is what creates the momentum and to enable us to do that larger work. So it's, like I said, a bit of a personal topic for me, but it certainly just is worthwhile to bring it up in this forum where it starts with us in order to be able to, create the world that we want to see, not just in large meetings and auditoriums, but one-on-one.
There you have it, folks. We can go on, but I'm so grateful for this panel discussion. Thank you, Parul, Breea, and Victoria. Another round of applause. You can never give them enough because that was amazing. And with that said, I'll pass the mic back to our awesome MC, Lillian.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bree, and thank you to our most wonderful, courageous, wise, and compassionate panelists. Can we actually, again, we can turn on our cameras now and let's give them another round of applause. So thank you all so much. I know it's always nerve-wracking. No matter how many times you do events, it's always nerve-wracking. And I know our three panelists really challenge themselves to be here today and to share their experiences. And so I do feel like you three truly embody the qualities of global citizens. And, I think so funny, I was going back to read the same lecture from Mr. Ikeda, and he talks about how, being a global citizen is not about how many languages you speak, but that, you may not have even traveled anywhere, or you may just work at an ordinary job, but yet you have this genuine concern for the peace and prosperity of the world. And I truly feel that all three of you really embody that, and inspires me to think more deeply too about, what I can do every day. So I think, yes, my awareness into action is strengthening because of the three of you. So thank you all so much again. So now that you've all heard from the panelists, I'm sure your dialogue muscles are itching and you're ready to stretch them. And so we're actually going to be able to go into our small group discussions at this time. And yes, thank you so much, Henri. So Henri's going to show us the discussion questions that we'll be discussing today. So you see them here. So in your small groups, we want to invite you to discuss the following questions. And afterwards, we'll have time for reflections with the larger group. And so the first one is, for everyone to just have the opportunity to reflect on what stood out to you in the panel discussion. And secondly, our center founder, Daisaku Ikeda, he writes, and I think Breea was the one who did quote this as well. He says, precisely because it is so complex, and he's talking about this issue of climate change, and requires a multifaceted approach, we can view the challenge of climate change as presenting a remarkable diversity of opportunities for human beings to give expression to their limitless potential. And so with this quote in mind, how can you use this complex challenge of climate change to give expression to your limitless potential? And lastly is the activity that I mentioned earlier, which is for each of you to be able able to come up with your own climate hope statement. So the format is, with the awareness that I can give expression to my limitless potential, I will fill in the blank. So I tried it out for myself. So I wrote, with the awareness that I can give expression to my limitless potential, I will not shy away from dialogue and take responsibility to continue learning. So that's my tentative statement for now. And so, so a couple things to keep in mind. One is, yes, so the questions will be posted in the chat. So if you didn't get a chance to take a photo, don't worry. So you'll be able to find it in the chat feature later. And then secondly, sorry, I'm just reading the chat. So secondly, the climate hope statement, we'll invite everyone to share your statements during the reflection. Of course, you can share other things too. And we have an exciting social media challenge that I'll introduce in a little bit. But yeah, if you can write down or jot down your climate hope statements, we'd love to hear them afterwards. So and then lastly, sometimes when you get into these breakout groups, you have the moment where like, oh, should you talk first? So, we find it helpful if one person, if you want to take the lead to, maybe facilitate the discussion and maybe do a round of introductions and then jump straight into the questions. So, and if you have any questions, our program staff will be able to come in and help you. So I think there's like a help button that you can click once you get into your breakout room. So I think we'll be entering those soon. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. We'll give a couple seconds for everyone to join back in. Awesome. How was everyone's discussion? Did you enjoy it? I know there's always not enough time. You want to go on and on. But I thought I heard some birds chirping somewhere. Someone's out in nature. Great. So I think we have a lot of people back. Our discussion was wonderful. Oh, that's great. Yeah, so actually this is one of my favorite parts of all of our events, which is the share back. When we were at the center, we got to run around with the mic, and I really missed that a lot, I realized today. But today we're gonna do it through Zoom, and it's gonna be great. And so yeah, so we wanted to take some time, maybe about 10 minutes, to welcome reflections from your small group discussions. So, and if you have your, I realize like maybe the climate hope statement might have been challenging for some to come up with, but if you have it, I'll invite you to post it in the chat. So yeah, any group, if you would like to share, there's actually a raise hand function that you can use if you go to, if you click on participants, and if you raise your hand, I will try to call in as many people as we can. So, okay, I'm gonna start with Ricky. So Ricky, I'm gonna, yes, someone unmuted you, so please go ahead.
Okay, just briefly, I'll say that what this has done is showed me that nothing is impossible. I've missed my good friend Ginny for a long time, and for us to end up in the same group, to me, shows nothing's impossible. So that is so encouraging. And I mentioned to her, you young people and the people on the panel are so encouraging. I'm so thrilled with all of you. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ricky. I'm so happy you ended up with Ginny. yeah, I actually ended up with my boss, Kevin. So we were joking, how did we end up together? So, you know, those connections are very strong, I'm sure. So let's see, if I think someone else also raised their hand earlier. I mean, I'm so sorry if I might ask you to raise hand again. Since I don't see. Okay, so David, yes, I saw our program staff will unmute you now. Please go ahead.
Yeah, and our group was, the conversation was really wonderful. And one of the things that was super about it, we united people from Brazil, Mexico, and the United States. And Todd talked about the importance of, you know, government reprioritizing, you know, it's changing its priorities, you know, to really do something about this problem. And he also mentioned the how hopeful it was that, you know, the power of youth and how young people are changing. And we also talked about the importance of those very little things that we can do in our daily lives in a disciplined way to make a difference. And so that's what I wanted to share.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think whenever I see the very young, you know, I think I used to think I'm a youth, and then I see these youth climate activists and I think, oh, I'm not so young anymore. But it really inspires me. But it's also, you know, all of, you know, all the people that have come before us that continue to support the youth. So anyway, thank you so much for sharing, David. And I think we have Victoria Lambert next. I think you're in Victoria. So.
Hi, everybody. Peace and blessings. You know, there are no accidents. This is absolutely wonderfully, incredibly, awesomely amazing. And we had a lady from Kentucky, Sue B. We had me in Philadelphia. We had Kat from Florida, and Fatima from North Carolina. We had some great words that came up. We had compostability come up. We had sustainability. We talked about courage, wisdom, and compassion. And I shared with them that I'm short on the courage. I'm not feeling too positive, but they uplifted me by talking about the Earth Charter and dialogue and how we've all been doing things, little things, to try to make a difference in our communities, in our world. And lastly, more importantly, we acknowledge these incredible hostesses that we've had this evening. I'm so proud to be sharing the world with you all, young people. You are awesome, and I'm just so grateful for the platform that we can all look at each other and say, wow, this is really cool. And even beyond that, of course, we all chanted Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, so you know that was wonderful too. But interfaith and dialogue are key words here. And we were humbly thanking you. I think I could say that for the other three girls.
Thank you so much, Victoria, for sharing. And yeah, I definitely agree. I think maybe Bree mentioned this earlier too. This pandemic has brought us an unexpected opportunity to connect in this new kind of way, especially through Zoom, and you know, connecting people from, you know, Buddhist backgrounds, but all different faiths as well. And we don't always get these opportunities, right? So this is really so great. And so next we have Natasha. If you'd like to share, someone will unmute here.
Yes, you know, I really loved the group that I was in. It was very diverse, all different ages and locations. We did have somebody that was in Barcelona, Spain. And you know, I was able to really listen to what everyone was saying, and it sounded like most of all that everybody is very hopeful. So it was really nice to be together in different parts, especially hearing someone from California talking about the fires and how, you know, it was night and day to see the sky, and then for blue, you know, another person challenging with their own health, but really having such firm conviction in every participation of the dialogue. And then someone from in Spain, you know, just with absolutely no doubt. It was amazing to hear her voice. She was like, oh, everything's gonna work out. Like, there was no doubt. I felt that collectively, I wrote it here. I formulated with the awareness that I can give expression to my limitless potential. I will never slacken to seek to learn and seek to maintain hope. You know, I felt like that really was what it was all about. And we all did different things. So it was very diverse. And I'm so appreciative that we have that opportunity on so many instances and to be able to do that today. So yes, thank you.
Thank you so much, Natasha, for sharing and for sharing your climate hope statement. We're getting close to the end of our reflection, so I'm so sorry we can't take any more reflections for today, but please continue to share, whether with each other or on social media, or you can reach out to any of us. And I wanted to, I had this quote kind of on hand, and I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to share it, but I'd love to. And it's actually from the 2002 proposal that I quoted from earlier from Mr. Ikeda. And he says that resolving this crisis will require the commitment of more knowledge, technology, and funds. But what is even more fundamentally lacking, in my view, are such intangible elements as a sense of solidarity and common purpose with our fellow inhabitants of the earth, and a real sense of responsibility toward future generations. So I really wanted to share that because I feel like, especially this reflection, you know, really, really embodied that. And so I'm going to actually ask our behind the scenes staff to pull up a graphic slide. So I know we would love to hear all the climate hope statements that you all came up with, and we didn't have enough time to hear from everyone. And then Natasha, thank you for setting such a wonderful example of what that can sound like. So we wanted to invite everyone to participate in this climate hope social media challenge. So for those of you who are on social media, Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, so step one would be to follow us at Ikeda Center. That's our username, our handle. And then step two is to post a selfie, so a photo of yourself with your climate hope statement in the caption. And throughout the next couple of weeks, we will be reposting your posts. And so actually I forgot to include it in here, but if you can tag us at Ikeda Center and use the hashtag climate hope, that would be great. So we'll post it in the chat again with the instructions, but if you want to take a photo, I'll give it a couple of seconds. Great. Awesome. Thank you so much. Great. So thank you so much, everyone. Today, we have just one last most exciting agenda item today. So actually, we have our executive advisor, Jason Gula, joining us from Chicago. And for those of you who don't know Jason, he's also professor of bilingual bicultural education and director of the Institute for Daisaku Ikeda Studies in Education at DePaul University. So thank you for sharing closing remarks with us tonight, Jason. I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, everyone. It's so good to see everybody. Let me maybe just begin by saying my thoughts are with people who are in the places that are really being affected. And I think one of the great results of climate change is the spread of something like the pandemic, which is really affecting everyone, and especially communities of color disproportionately. I was thinking, what could I share that could maybe wrap up, that could add anything to the wonderful things that were already said? And I noticed that, well, two things I was thinking about. Right before I joined, I don't know if anybody reads Huffington Post, but there's a really nice article that says, being a youth climate activist during lockdown is hard. here's how I'm still making a difference. And I thought, wow, that's right in rhythm with what we're doing. So if you want to see how a young person is doing it, I would ask you to read that. But then I thought, you know, in many of the dialogue nights and dialogue events that we do at the Ikeda Center, Buddhism is always sort of discussed and is always on the table, especially Daisaku Ikeda's ideas. But this one in particular, and I think there's a reason for it. And so I was racing with my camera off. I was racing behind the scenes figuring, oh, I'm going to change what I'm going to say. I think to understand this current moment, in my group, I was saying, we often critique Western ways of approaching ideas in education with more Western ways of doing something. But Daisaku Ikeda's ideas are uniquely Eastern and quintessentially universal. So what are his ideas? I think fundamentally his perspective is Buddhist humanism. I think we can say that. We might call it, for him, Soka humanism. But fundamentally, he's focused on the human being, the individual human being. And so climate seems so massive, and yet we have to think, okay, so how do we bring this down to a life-size paradigm, what the human being can do? So I wanted to draw on 3 concepts that some of you may know, and so this may be a refresher course for some of you, and for others it may be new, but it's 3 ways that he has been thinking about, or lenses that he's been approaching climate, the climate catastrophe through. They are Eshofuni, Engi, and Kyosei, all Japanese terms, and I'll translate them as we go through. Eshofuni is literally the inseparability of life in its environment, which maintain a relationship as a single unit while interacting with and affecting each other. This is a fundamental principle of his Buddhist humanist perspective, and it represents a viewpoint that is rapidly becoming a major paradigm of what we might call a postmodernist, a sort of way of knowing, particularly what is now called post-humanist thought. Daisaku Ikeda adds that the subjective basis for this dynamic, causal, and inseparable relationship between humankind and nature is the concept of ichinen, or the mind or life at a single moment. Here, both Nichiren, the propounder of the Buddhist philosophy he practices, and Daisaku Ikeda himself references the Lotus Sutra, the teaching of, quote, the wonderful workings of the mind, as well as the teaching of Ichinen Sanzen, or 3,000 realms in a single life moment, propounded by Ji, the 6th century founder of the Chinese Tiantai school of Buddhism. This, I think, is important for how we think about climate change relative to us as human beings. 3,000 realms in a single life moment is the theoretical system to describe the ontological reality of the expansive relational potentiality of human beings' interiority and the exteriority of our lives in a single life moment. It expresses the infinite, complex, and interconnected spiritual and material realms possible in each instant of life and the individual's agency in effectuating them. Mr. Ikeda states, one's mind, the innermost realm of life, is vast and boundless. It is dynamic. And he says all phenomena of the 3,000 realms, everything, including the biosphere, is contained within the single moment of life, our innermost mind of us ordinary human beings. And the single moment of life or mind pervades these 3,000 realms. And when the state of our mind changes, we change. Or rather, by changing the innermost orientation of our minds, we change not just ourselves, but the external world, the physical environment. So he posits through this lens that in the context of person-environment relationality, from the single element of mind springs all the various lands in environmental conditions. And he embraces this concept in Japanese, it's called Sanpen Doden, or the threefold transformation of the land, which is the principle that the land is purified and transformed when one changes their heart or their mind and transforms themselves. So hope here is key. We have to begin with hope. And this concept takes on even greater significance in the Buddhist principle he uses of Engi, what is dependent origination or dependent causation. For him, it reflects a cosmology in which all humanity and the natural phenomena come into existence within a matrix of interconnectedness. And he views every phenomenon, be it social or natural, as the result of its connection with something else. Nothing can exist in isolation. Everything is interrelated. And he says, usually we think of interconnection in spatial terms, but for him, this concept is multidimensional, including the dimension of time in a living cosmos. And he adds, this is one principle that properly understood will help us establish a proper reason to address things like climate change. So then he talks about Kyosei. Kyosei for him is the ethos that seeks to bring harmony from conflict, unity from rupture, that is based more on us than me. It signals a spirit that seeks to encourage mutual flourishing and mutually supportive relationships among human beings and between humans and nature. He goes on to say, it is my belief that by making this ethic of Kyosei, or creative coexistence, the shared spirit of our age, we can find the certain means to close the gap between power and ethical standards of behavior. And he concludes that such an ethic of Kyosei, or creative coexistence, will play an ever more important role as the problems of environmental pollution and environmental destruction and dwindling resources grow increasingly serious. So in the context of climate change, the climatic moment, and the crisis of sustainability, this creative coexistence parallels, I don't know if you know Jedediah Purdy, who writes quite a bit about this, but it parallels his call to make meaning in the Anthropocene, or this moment of climate crisis. And in 2017, in his piece, Global Solidarity of Youth, Daisaku Ikeda revisits these three ideas, extolling the power of youth to transform society and the current climatic moment. In particular, he advocates for this kind of human perspective, for empowering response to the dominant views of fatalism and chance that frequently frame this kind of climate discourse and can make people indifferent to the harm they inflict on others. So this is why we need a kind of climate hope, right? And we can use these concepts for a way of thinking about the transformation from the interior to transform the exterior. And then I'll conclude with this. Taken together, these concepts, Eshofuni, Engi, and Kyosei, are interlocking principles for actualizing a fundamental intertransformation, for leveraging and enhancing the full complexity of the human condition to effectuate outer change. Mr. Ikeda calls such a necessarily constant and unending transformation at the deep interiority of each individual life, it's been said already, a human revolution, from the private and isolated lesser self to, held prisoner to its own desires and passions and hatreds, to the greater self of expanded, deeply rooted and collective identity, coexistent with all phenomena and the living essence of the entire universe, including the biosphere across space and time. And for Mr. Ikeda, such a persistent and volitional inner transformation, that hope is possible even in the midst of the seemingly distant thing that is climate change. This is ultimately what he says it means to become fully and truly human. So I hope that with that, we can go on and really bring out this kind of hope that we can change it, beginning from inside and moving outward. So thank you so much for letting me share.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jason. Whenever I hear Jason speak, I always wish, I wish I had a professor like Jason in college, because I definitely didn't have one. So these opportunities are extra special for me too. And thank you all, everyone, so much. I know we're right at 8:30, and I don't want to keep everyone from getting rest or waking up to go to work if you're in another time zone. But at the end of our meetings, we usually take a couple of screenshots of all the participants, and we usually use them for our write-up for our website, and sometimes they get featured in various articles or on social media. So if you would not like to be in the photo, that's totally fine, and you can turn off your camera. But if you would like to be on, I'm going to be taking about, let's see, 1, 2, 3, okay, 4. Yeah, so we'll take 4 screenshots. And before I do that, I just again want to thank everyone so much for joining. We're testing out this 7 p.m. hour, and so I appreciate all of you being here. And in the fall, so we most likely will have another virtual dialogue before the end of the year. Everything's TBD at this point, but please stay tuned, and we'll definitely be sharing more information. So thank you once again for tuning in from all around the world, and we hope to see you again very soon. So with that, I will take our photos. So, okay, so we'll do first one. Okay, so on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, peace. Okay, all right, bear with me. We'll take the second one. Okay, 1, 2, 3, peace. All right, promise, I think maybe 2 more. Okay, 1, 2, 3, peace. All right, last one. 1, 2, 3, peace. And yes, that is all. So thank you all so much for joining us today. Please have a wonderful rest of your September.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for joining.